Hi there folks, welcome back to Rich Review. So my latest TV show for you guys here happens to be For All Mankind Season 2. This was one of my most anticipated TV shows of the new year, considering I happen to really love For All Mankind Season 1. And unlike the previous season, which takes place over the course of a couple of years, this takes place 10 years later and obviously takes place over the course of several months in 1983. Now, this TV show was amazingly well into filming before COVID shut it down, and there were only 2 episodes left for it to film, and then they quickly were able to film it before the TV show was set to air. There's obviously a lot to love. Obviously, there's some stuff that I'm here like, yeah, this doesn't necessarily work for me, but I'm happy to see it anyway. In the beginning of the season, we were introduced to a highlight reel of stuff that has happened, and some of this stuff, okay, that's quite amusing. Other stuff, I'm just sort of like, well, do we really need to be told about that? Or could we at least be told about this in passing? I mean, oh yes, John Lennon survives his assassination attempt. John Paul II doesn't. I mean, Prince Charles marries Camilla. Okay, that's amusing, but do we really need to be told that Who Shot JR is still the big cultural touchstone event of the 1980s? How about the fact that Dallas remains a relatively obscure show? Of course, we need to obviously do something about that. Now, the first couple of episodes plays out like a where are these people now 10 years later, in which the Stevens are broken up. Gordo's a bit of a drunk and has a beer belly. Tracy's a celebrity, also a bit of a drunk herself. And she's married to a guy who's fairly wealthy off. Their kids now have been recast and aged up. Ed and Karen Baldwin. Ed's now head of the astronaut office. She is working at the outpost, and she's made it from a relatively dumpy place to a respectable restaurant business. They adopted a daughter named Kelly. Ellen and her husband are still closeted. Ellen is working under director Payne. Now, Tom Payne is based off a real guy, and how he dies here is interesting, even though in real life he would die of cancer in 1993. And obviously Danny has lost her husband in the interim. In the beginning of this series, everything seems to be perfectly harmonious, although at the same time, Russians are staking out territory on the moon. And obviously the military is encroaching on NASA's territory or authority. We meet the military liaison, played by the father from Smart Guy, and I happen to like John Marshall Jones. Of course, we also introduced to more new characters. Introduced a woman who is playing Sally Ride, who is just another astronaut, and I guess maybe that's a interesting notion to believe that, oh yes, Sally Ride was herself closeted. It will only be revealed that she was a lesbian after she died, and that is compared to Ellen herself. Now, if there's a small problem I do have with this season is that, oh yeah, unlike some of the kids who are now recast and aged up, some of the adults are not supplied with efficiently accurate makeup. I mean, outside of Margot, who's now given glasses and sort of a shorter haircut, I mean, do we really buy that Ed Baldwin is a Korean war vet? It doesn't look sufficiently enough like he could be a Korean war vet, and I mean, Chanel Van Sant just looks herself, more or less. The Karen character gets involved in an affair with one of the kids, and I'm like, ooh, that's a little bit creepy, but hey, look, who wouldn't want to have an affair with your sufficient friend's kid? And also, the fact is, you know, these characters routinely defy orders. Now, I'm not an astronaut, nor do I want to be one. That seems like a very hard job. And it seems like, oh yeah, that takes years of training to do, which probably does. But I'm thinking to myself, if you're constantly defying orders, would you still be an astronaut? I don't think so. And oh yeah, you're bringing guns on the moon. Trust me, that's always going to end badly, regardless of how you think about it, or bringing a gun aboard a spaceship. I'm always thinking to myself, how does Star Trek do that? Obviously, they have phaser beams, and quite frankly, they don't use bullets. Obviously, you get some interesting moments of deep-fakeness involving, you know, Johnny Carson. We also get some Reagan material here, involving a guy who obviously can do a convincing Reagan accent. Now, obviously, this season does end in a way that, like, I think it's supposed to be upbeat, although it's incredibly downbeat at the same time. And obviously, Ronald D. Moore has stated, oh yes, we have a 7-season plan. It's going to jump a decade each time, so hopefully we're going to end up in the 2030s by the end this series ends. And obviously, some characters are going to be phased out other characters may be brought in. I mean, how long does the Sonya Wagner character, Molly Cobb, be around for, considering what happens to her when she's exposed to radiation? Obviously, it's like, I don't want anyone else's help. I am going to go out the way I am, in which that is, I basically am a trailblazer, and maybe she does die at being a trailblazer, but who? And again, I don't know how long the Baldwin's stay on there, because that character is probably going to be in his 60s, and whether or not anyone's still being an astronaut at the age of 60, although John Glenn was well into his 70s when he went back on the International Space Station. You know, and then this season does end with a Nirvana song in the 90s. And I'm thinking to myself, God dang it, we're still stuck on this planet, and they get to go to that one particular planet we've all been wanting to go to since forever. The Frenchman character gets sort of a love interest type of thing, even though the Russians are probably thinking to themselves, okay, can we turn her into an asset? There's a whole lot to discuss here, and I just happen to like every moment of it, every cultural reference. Really, Star Trek II premiered in 1983 instead of 1982 because, oh yes, Ronald D. Moore wrote for Star Trek. That's the Star Trek thing out there for you folks. So I would highly recommend that you watch For All Mankind Season 2. You won't be disappointed, even if you do have some issues with the material. Folks, For All Mankind Season 2, have you seen this? What you think? Please put everything in the comment box below here, folks. As always, folks, like, comment, subscribe, enrich yourself with knowledge. I'll see you next time, folks. Yes, hooray.